Honouring the contribution of many people over a long period of time to build God's great love, the local church, is one of the most important things we can do. So we may not be able to do it every day, but at the milestone moments, we should stop and celebrate and communicate why we are celebrating. Okay, so I've called today's talk Something Somewhere at Least Once, because Beck gets it. There's this crazy movie which is called Everything Everywhere All at Once, which won a bunch of Oscars last week. Has anybody seen the movie? Oh my gosh, you've got to watch it. It's hilarious. It's a mind bend. It is literally like looking inside the head of somebody whose outlook on life is everything everywhere all at once. It's just ridiculous. So I found it hilarious because I could see the symbolism everywhere. But it is like a visual representation of what a person's mind looks like who just lets life happen to them and brings no leadership to either their thinking or their actions. And something that leaders do is that we have to disseminate through all the noise and activity around us in order to bring leadership to ourselves and others. And leaders don't just let life happen to them and receive or participate in everything, everywhere, all at once. We don't just let it happen to us, everything, everywhere, all at once. We bring vision, purpose, and intentionality to our lives and the lives of the people that we lead. So today I want to talk about why and how leaders bring a culture of celebration into the spheres where they lead. Because, as you know, over this past weekend, we hosted a big celebration in the life of our church. And I mentioned it on Sunday morning. I didn't sleep very well Saturday night, and I think part of it was that I felt a little bit uncomfortable about the focus of the celebration being, me and Luke. That's a bit hard to receive. And as much as we tried to kind of push that away from ourselves a bit and make it all about the team and what it is that we've built together over the past decade, it still kind of made me feel a little bit uncomfortable. And also because I was so aware of how much people did, like how much people gave, how much time people gave, how much effort people put in to be able to make the whole thing happen. But I've had to push through the discomfort and the worrying about what people would think and do the celebration anyway, because I know how important it is to intentionally celebrate. I mean, even today, I've just been to an appointment in Newcastle this morning, and on my way home, I was listening to my Bible in a Year for Today, and it was the story of Caleb and Joshua bringing their good report back from the Promised Land. And if you know the story, it's kind of where we get the concept of us bringing a good report. There's always something that you can bring. There's always something that you can celebrate about the goodness of God, despite all of the circumstances, despite all of the everything, everywhere, all at once that could be happening all around you. We can always choose to focus on something to celebrate, on a good report to bring. And it's so interesting to read that account and see how harshly God deals with the spirit of the negativity that is in most of the people around us. The culture around us is mostly negativity and skepticism and cynicism. And God actually says that there's going to be a pretty harsh judgment on that, and that we're called to something different, like Sharon was saying earlier, a different culture. And in the culture of the kingdom, we choose to trust and believe that God is good and that he loves us so much that even the pain and circumstances and challenges that we're going through, even in the midst of all of that, we can find something to celebrate, something, somewhere, at least once we can find to celebrate. So here's my 3 little points about why and how we build a culture of celebration in the spheres where we lead. So first of all, we have to choose what is worth celebrating. What we celebrate as leaders has a huge impact on what gets repeated. And so in terms of not being an everywhere, everything, all at once kind of person and being intentional, the Bible is actually very clear about how we should focus our thoughts. And so I would suggest that this following list is also a good list of where to direct our focus of what kinds of things we celebrate. You may know where I'm going with this. Philippians 4 verse 8 says, keep your thoughts continually fixed. That's actually something you have to do. Keep your thoughts continually fixed on all that is authentic and real, honorable and admirable, beautiful and respectful, pure and holy, merciful and kind. And fasten your thoughts on every glorious work of God, praising him always. I would suggest that's a pretty good list of things to start with when we're trying to choose what to celebrate. And so that helps me to not be an everything everywhere all at once person. And it helps me choose what to celebrate and what not to celebrate. So for example, I don't celebrate when my kids quit something prematurely. I don't celebrate when somebody gossips in my presence. I don't celebrate when somebody gets a promotion by being narcissistic or self-serving. But the things that I can choose to celebrate and that I will choose to bring a word of celebration about are when people are faithful, when they do hard things, when they make sacrifices, when they work on the purity of their heart, when they are honest about their motivations. Do you know what? More and more, the older I get, I celebrate that because it's getting to the real person. It's getting to the heart of the matter. And once we can face the heart of the matter, then we can really grow and be transformed by Jesus. But while ever we're trying to pretend that our motivations are something different than what they actually are, we're stuck. So I will choose to celebrate when people are honest about their motivations and when they acknowledge the goodness of God in season and out, not just when things are going well, but including when things are difficult. So these are the things that are most worth celebrating. I can't celebrate everything everywhere all at once because I'm not in all places at all times, but I can choose what kinds of things are worthwhile of celebration, are the most worthwhile of celebration. So first of all, choose what is worth celebrating. Second of all, communicate why we are celebrating. And one of the reasons why you can't celebrate everything everywhere all at once is because the best and most intentional celebrations include communicating the why of celebrating. So yes, celebrating is good on its own, but its real power comes when it's coupled with a compelling why. So why did I push through and allow the celebration to happen this past weekend, even though it was about us and it made us a bit uncomfortable? Well, because it's an important and valuable opportunity to communicate some compelling whys to our church, to lead us. Because I continue to be a leader even while we celebrate mine and Luke's leadership. And so here's some of the whys, such as honouring leadership is important and biblical. And so unless we have leaders that teach us that honouring leadership is important and biblical, then we'll never learn it. Honouring faithfulness to God's call on your life is important and biblical. Honouring, as Sharon was already saying before, staying in a small place, if that's what God says, rather than pursuing bigger and better opportunities is important. Honouring that none of us is more important than the whole of us is important. Honouring the contribution of many people over a long period of time to build God's great love, the local church, is one of the most important things we can do. So we may not be able to do it every day, but at the milestone moments, we should stop and celebrate and communicate why we are celebrating. I've been thinking about this in relation to the Old Testament, because I'm parked there at the moment with my Bible in a year, and it's the second year in a row that I've, read and listened to these stories, and I'm just learning so much each time. And, if you read the Old Testament and the stories of Moses leading that rabble of people through the wilderness for 40 years, it sounds quite harsh. It can, if you just read it at face value, it can paint the picture that God is a harsh God. But if you can take a bit of a long range view of a group of people doing something for the first time, something that's never been done before, coming together as a community of people following God as their leader, then you can absolutely begin to understand why the lines and the boundaries and the restrictions are in place. And so I was reading the other day about how, they had to park the tent, set up tent, which I'm sure took a long time. So set up the tents and the camps whenever the presence of God stopped. And then maybe that presence only was there for 2 days, maybe it was there for 5 years. But whatever the cloud remained, they had to stay in that place. But as soon as it moved, as soon as God moved, the people had to pack everything up, even if they'd only just set up camp 2 days ago. Pack everything up, all these thousands of people, all the belongings, everything, and get on the road again to follow God. And I thought, well, that sounds like God's just playing games with his people, unless you take the perspective that for people to learn how to do something, then somebody has to teach them the first time. And so until something's been done once and God shows them very clearly what the expectations are, then they don't actually get to learn. You have to understand that there's a compelling why behind God asking them to follow the cloud as soon as he says to move. When God says move, go. And so I was thinking about that in relation to our weekend, and I thought, well, the only reason you get to have a 10-year celebration is because it's never actually been done before. I've been a part of our church for 25 years. And when Luke and I came into leadership 10 years ago, we were the 10th senior pastors. And the guy before us came when we called him in a crisis, and we were on the board, and we were the only members left of the board. And he came to give us 3 months to help us figure out what we were going to do next. And then he stayed 6 years, and then he transitioned to us. And so before that, there'd never been a chance to build anything. There was no cause for celebration because it was never the same people. There was never a clear vision. There was never something that would help us build together as community. And that's all stuff that takes time. And so then when you do have those milestone moments, like reaching the promised land, Caleb and Joshua coming back and saying, it's great. Yes, there's going to be some challenges, but you should see the fruit in this place. And then people to just not choose to celebrate it. That's why they were treated so harshly by God. So to be good at bringing a culture of celebration as leaders, we have to communicate a compelling why. And the last thing is we should create momentum with when we celebrate. So rather than just being an everything, everywhere, all at once, unintentional celebrator, we can really be strategic and bring vision and momentum by choosing when we celebrate. So this photo that you can see in the chat here is my little munchkins 9 years ago, not 10 years ago, 9 years ago. And it came across my Facebook feed yesterday. So just one of those memories that comes across your path. And the post that I had with it said that I'd decided that we needed a mental health day that day. And so I've obviously, which is not like me at all, obviously let the kids stay home from school, bake biscuits, and have a tea party. See there, we've all got little cups and saucers. Very cute. Now, I can't any longer remember the reason for deciding that day was a mental health day and that it was worth taking the day off school and baking biscuits and having a tea party. So I don't know what the catalyst was for the decision or its timing, but it reminded me how important it is to stop and celebrate what matters most. And part of pausing to celebrate is about an intentional choice to slow down rather than trying to do everything, everywhere, all at once. It's kind of like the principle of the Sabbath. The principle of the Sabbath is one of those disciplines which helps us become a person who's not living by an everything, everywhere, all at once kind of mentality. So sometimes, not often, but at the right moment and for the right reasons, it's entirely appropriate to pull the kids out of school for a day and spend that time celebrating what matters most. Family, good health care, recalibrating after a busy season. And so that inspired me after seeing that yesterday, because we had our children who are still, reasonably young. Some of them have struggled to get to school on Monday after a big weekend. And Luke just happens to be away overnight tonight, which is I don't know. I'm sure it's the first time since COVID. So let's say 4 years since he's been away overnight. And so I just saw this golden opportunity, and I was inspired by this photo that came across my feed. And I thought, we've been all in, our family is all in. And that means big weekends sometimes for the kids. And last weekend was a big weekend. So I wrote my kids a note this morning. Max was not at all inspired by it. And it said that we're going to have a chick flick night tonight while Dad is away. And they got up out of bed and they read it on the dining room table that's in front of the flowers that you guys gave us on the weekend. And it just brought a real lift to the atmosphere. Not for poor Maxo, but for the others, especially the little girls. It brought a real lift because we're going to do something really unusual. It's a one-off. It's a something somewhere at least once kind of a thing, not an everything everywhere all at once thing, to have a grazing board in front of the TV and watch a movie on a Wednesday night. Like, it's just not what we do, but it's important to pause and celebrate and recalibrate after a busy season and build momentum from what it is that we've just been through together. So we don't pull the kids out of school for a day every month, and we don't attempt to host a large dinner party at church every quarter. We can't systemize a something somewhere at least once kind of celebration. Instead, we choose intentionally what we celebrate, communicate the why, and then be flexible enough to make the when work for maximum impact for whatever we are leading.